Good evening. How are you? Back in my coaching space. Welcome. Good to see you. All right. So, as the title of this says, this is more about our Middle East life story. So, for those who don't know, if you don't know yet, if you hadn't been following me long enough, we did live in the Middle East for 2 years as a family, 3 years for my husband by himself a year before we came there. And so this is number 2 of however many this will take of me telling you little bits and pieces of how that came to be and what it was like, and then coming back as well. So our first session that I told y'all some of it was more of the why did we move there, how did that come up in our world to do that, what kind of decisions had to be made and how quickly and things like that. Kind of led up to a little bit toward us moving there, but not there yet. Actually, I left y'all off at, I told you this time I believe I was going to fill in some more of the what happened before we moved there kind of thing, how we prepared to go there, things like that. And then I'll just keep going from there. Gonna try not to keep you very long. I've got things going on in our house as well that I need to get down back out of the room and go help with and be part of. So anyway, so kind of picking up where we left off, I did tell you how I was pregnant with our second child 9 years after our first child and thought we were settling down actually in the area of South Louisiana we were living in on the north shore of Louisiana in Mandeville, Covington, Abita Springs area. Just north of New Orleans, working for Oxnard Health System before that, but then actually when this all came about, I was working for St. Tammany Parish Hospital, had just started working there because it was our little parish, which is in Louisiana. You don't have counties, you have parishes because it's Napoleonic law in Louisiana. So a unique thing about our state that I grew up in, that we all grew up in our, well, not we all, my husband and I grew up in, and our oldest for a time was there, and our youngest, our middle was born there. Our youngest has lived there off and on, but not a ton, honestly. So anyways, but yeah, I have some very deep Louisiana roots, as does my husband. That said, we were living in an area we really enjoyed. We had been there a long time. We fit in there really well, had a lot of things that we just thought we were settling in that spot. And then God had other plans, and so he introduced us to this option to move to the Middle East, and we realized this was part of his plan for us, and we had to make this decision and agree to it, and we had to make the decision within a week, and my husband had to move within a month of making the decision. Kids and I stayed back, or myself, my pregnant self, and our oldest son, who was at the time our only child, stayed back. We lived 6 hours from our parents, so grandparents and all. One set of grandparents was in Italy at the time that all of this was kind of going down, and just for a visit and once in a lifetime deal. And then the other set was up in our hometown area. And 3 days before my husband left the country to move by himself, while I was, like I said, pregnant, and right before the school year was about to start, our oldest was still, he was our only one at the time. He was still in public school in Louisiana then, and he was about to start school back after the summer, because this is toward the end of the summer, getting there at least. And our son broke his wrist on the right arm, which was his writing hand, 3 days before my husband left the country. So that was fun. Did not have insurance yet because my new job, I hadn't been there long enough for it. So all fun things, right? We've been through all kinds of things that I can help you with if you go through all these unexpected life detours, right? God has helped us through them all, and provided well for us through them, and taught us a lot too, especially about his provision and his faithfulness to us, and his guidance even when things seem scary and just impossible, and like moving to the Middle East. So that said, for that next year, my husband was across the world from us. He did take, I think I mentioned this in the last one, he took a portion, like one playing set from our Battleship game with him in his luggage, an actual physical one, not a computer, which he had his iPad and we had one back home. And then our son had the other side of the Battleship, or the other portion of our game. So they would get on the iPad on, I think at the time we used Skype, before we started using FaceTime and Zoom and things like that. But we used Skype, and they would talk to each other and do a battleship game live from across the world together. And it's 8 hours ahead of Central Time Zone, and where he lived in Qatar, where we lived later together with him. And so we always had to time things, appropriately for that as well. During that time he was gone, I was high risk OB for being 38 years old, having our second child. And so I was going to a special high risk doctor, and at one point my mother-in-law was with us for that visit, my son and her and myself, to find out if it was, the gender of the baby. And our son had been praying, or saying, I guess, he wanted a sister for a long time, but then had changed his mind by this time before we went for this visit, because he has so many girl cousins that he decided girls were too bossy, and he didn't want a sister. He wanted a brother. But he was the one that wanted this sibling in the first place, and we weren't trying. It was just, God's timing for us, and him wanting it so bad, I guess. So initially it was that he wanted a sister, though, and then sure enough, we're in this Skype. We had Daddy on Skype for that, and the doctor said it was a girl, and our son went, well, the next one will be a brother. And I'm 38 years old, and I'm already called elderly multigravida per ICD-9 or 10 coding, whatever it was. I think it was ICD-10 by then. Yeah, so elderly at 38 years old, that's beautiful. But anyway, I said, there's not going to be another one, Sure enough, 2 years later, right before we moved back from Qatar, we did have a brother for him. Not intentionally, of course. It was all God's plan, so it's quite funny. Just thought that was a neat, funny little story. And that's kind of how we did a lot of life in that year that we were apart like that. We would, just Skype together for different things like that. I mean, I'm sitting here growing his baby inside me as he's gone, and I'm working full time, and our son's in public school full time, regular school hours and all. And then because we lived so far from family, and we had friends and all in town, and definitely they were tons of help, and our pastor's wife and different people we really treasure and cherish and miss, but we didn't want to, lean on anybody locally as heavily as I needed help, and we had family that was willing, and more than willing, and wanting to be part of all of that as much as they could to help us. So basically my mom and mother-in-law would switch out several weeks at a time and come down from North Louisiana and stay with us, so that we could have a little help around the house and life. And even after I had the baby, they did that as well. It's Mayla, our daughter that's now 10 years old. And they would help us, during that time as well. I did get to be on 6 weeks of maternity leave, not a terribly long one, because like I said, I hadn't been there a long time. I didn't have a lot of time built up, extra, money to pay for being off. He was going through a lot there, trying to get settled and get contract stuff squared away. So we really honestly weren't getting much income from there. We could have even been not getting any, and there were times we weren't getting any. He was not getting paid anything for a time. I'll tell you about that in a second, but it was very, very hard for him getting settled there. But by the time we came, most everything was, settled, squared away, what have you, for us to be able to come. So we wouldn't have been able to come during that first year because it was so rocky for him. And yeah, that was a tough time. But, and just in general, we're adjusting to life without him around, and we have a young boy that's a preteen that needs his daddy, misses his daddy, a mom that needs help with that, all the family, missing him, and then the baby, and then, like I said, she was born. So he got to come back about 6 months into his contract time, or his time over there. Just got here about 2 days, or got to New Orleans about 2 days before she was born. We picked him up at the airport. It was a precious time, and then he was there for her birth 2 days later, and then he stayed a whole month and got to be part of the first month of her life there, and then he had to go back and be back over there while she was growing, and everybody else was too, and we were just doing life, and I was still working until she was about 6 months old. It was the beginning of the summer, basically, when I quit my job, and I had been there about a year at that point. And then the kids and I went to North Louisiana and stayed with family, back and forth with different parts of family, a lot with the in-laws, in the country, and a nice, plot of land they have and everything. But also with, different other parts of the family, my parents, and got to go visit my dad and stepmom in Oklahoma City, I believe, during that time. We did. Got to go just on some little trips with different parts of the family here and there for some fun things to do before we left the country. And so kind of our way of saying goodbye for who knows how long. We didn't know how long this was going to go, because it wasn't a contract with a specific end date, and it honestly, a majority of the contract was in Arabic when he signed it, and he didn't even get it to sign until he came back from America after visiting us 6 months into being there. That was a lot of the struggle, was the first 6 months, because he was not there with an American company. He wasn't there with a Western, so they say, company. He was there working for their Olympic committee, their Qatar, Doha, Qatar, Olympic committee, their government. So with that, you're in a different world. You're in the Arabic world of, you do things on their timeline, and their timeline is whatever it is. Not rushed. And then there's times if they want to rush it, then yeah, but it's whatever they find to be important at the time and urgent. Otherwise, it's just whenever. And so that's kind of how the contract thing went down. For the first 6 months, he didn't officially have his contract to even look at, much less sign. When he did finally get it, it was after he had come back from visiting us in the States, and again, he didn't even honestly know what all was in it, and he just had to sign it. And all in all, it didn't turn out terribly, but there was a lot of time. Well, that first 6 months, the committee organization is where, like, there's the Olympic committee, that's the highest level, and then he worked for the volleyball association under that. So the volleyball association wasn't who was responsible for directly paying him. It was the Olympic committee that was, but in that interim time when he didn't officially have his contract yet, basically the volleyball association, only at his request each month or what have you, whenever he would ask them, and he would have to ask them for an advance in his pay, and even that, he wouldn't usually ask them for a full paycheck advance, because he didn't know, for one, how long it was going to drag out. He didn't want to ask for more than he thought he might need, but we were, needing his income and mine to kind of make our world, both in the States and their work. Both here in the States and over there work. And anyways, for just different reasons, he was not knowing when this time period was finally going to come to an end, where he would need to keep asking for these advances. So he was hoping it would be any day. He was being led to believe it would be. So he didn't think he was going to need full advances, and was trying not to rack up too much. We didn't have to, of course, pay back advances or anything like that, but the Olympic committee then had to pay back the Volleyball Association all the advances that they gave to us once the contract finally got official. I know it's all crazy, but that's kind of what he went through during that time, what we went through. So there were, like I said, months where he thought maybe it was going to happen any day, so he wouldn't ask for an advance. There were other months where he would ask for partial, sometimes whole, and sometimes the Volleyball Association would kind of get a little frustrated, even though it wasn't his fault, and they did know that. But they're just like, when are you going to finally get this squared away? Which, he had nobody really to help him. You just kind of find your way. And so between that and immigrating officially, hello, Amanda, between, the whole contract process itself, and then the official immigration process to become a resident, not a citizen, but a resident of a foreign country. And then, of course, living there and abiding by their law, which is Sharia law, by the way. You kind of don't, you just learn along the way as you go. And sometimes you have a lot of help, and other times you don't. He didn't have a lot of help. We didn't have a lot of help. We figured a lot of things out on our own, mostly. So that takes time. It takes effort. It's frustrating. It's It's expensive at times. It's just a lot. So I do very highly empathize with people who do immigrate and go through all the channels that you have to go through in a country, especially when you don't speak their native language. It's just a lot. It really is. But it can be done, and we did it, and it just took time and effort and money. A lot of that too. So made it work though. But when you fly into, as an American, when you fly into Qatar, you do get visa on arrival. It lasts for 30 days, I believe, and then a lot of people do what's called visa runs throughout. You'll know of those if you've ever heard of anything like that, but they'll fly to Dubai or Kuwait or something for not even a full day sometimes. Sometimes they'll literally get off the plane and get right back on it, or they'll stay a weekend and have fun and come back. But that resets the visa, so if they have to do that before they're fully done with their immigration process. We never had to do that once we got there, nor did he when he was there. But you know, that's how some people have to handle that. But it, you know, you're legally there when you just arrive as an American, just for a short time until you get things squared away. But anyway, that's some of that. You're not a dual citizen when you become a resident. We have a baby that was born there, I'll get to in another episode. But with that, you're not given immediate citizenship for you or anyone else in the family. The baby is not a dual citizen, is not given citizenship. That's a huge process that they rarely give to anyone that's not Qatari or Qatari, not born there, or not from there by blood. Okay, so which is fine. We didn't necessarily want that, so we didn't. But we're thankful for our time that we were there as visitors in their country, and we abided by their laws, and you know, lived our life there and experienced a lot that we would have never experienced in any other way. It opened our eyes and our minds to things we just never could otherwise have become aware of, and in so many ways. I could go on and on. Especially our son as well, getting to see him experience all of that and meet different people and things like that from all over the world. We did, of course, start our homeschooling journey there and participated in a co-op there with other people from all over the world that were homeschooling there. So that was pretty cool. That brings me back to what did we do in the interim before we officially moved there as a family. Like I said, my husband was already there. He was struggling through both working but also managing, and he got down to like having literally less than $1 in his pocket at one point because of that whole situation I described. He was there during the heat of the summer and Ramadan and all kinds of things. If you know, you know. He literally got, by the time we got there, he was rail thin. I'd never seen him that thin since pictures of him from his younger teenage years before I even knew him. Yeah, it was a lot for him to adjust to being there and get all that squared away, but thankfully he did. The kids and I back in the States with family and all, like I said, we did a lot of the visiting everybody. Another thing though that we had to do was my mother was able to help us do the last parts of this on literally the last night, but we had lived in this rent house for like 4 years, I think. We, like I said, been there, thought we were staying, and we had to pack that whole house up into a storage unit there in town in Covington, Louisiana, and clean the house, leave it for the landlords to go through and hopefully give us some deposit back, and we didn't get it back. We didn't tear it up, but it's still, you know, 4 years, kids, everything, you know, life. But we did our best. We did our very best. And I was pregnant. No, I was postpartum by the time we did that. So postpartum, 6-month-old baby, and yeah, and the preteen and all. And then we did have some friends from church and work and different places that did come through and help us in various ways. We did a lot of getting rid of, a lot of selling, a lot of, you know, trash. Just, I can't even describe what this process was like to move out of that house and into storage. And then on top of that, I'm moving myself and my children to the Middle East, and we're going to start homeschooling there, which we've never done before. So I'm also researching homeschool, trying to figure out what we want to do, how to do it, what we need for that, what we can maybe get there or use from like online or what have you without having to buy it physically, but then what we're going to need to purchase here before we go and put in our luggage, which, by the way, another not perk of working for a not Western, not American company was that we did not, that's why we had to homeschool. We didn't get an education stipend like other places would give you. No money was given to us to do any education, which over there you don't have a public school option, as a foreigner at least, to go to. You have to either homeschool or you have to go to an international school. There's many, and they're great. They're very high level, and they're from all over the world, from America to Finland to all over England. One's from, the British ones, Australia, I think. Several schools there, but they're expensive. They're expensive. So if you don't get a stipend for that, that's not happening. So a lot of people do go there and homeschool because of that, among other reasons. So I'd always wanted to homeschool, so I was really actually grateful for the opportunity to finally be a stay-at-home mom and a homeschool mom, because never before that job could we have afforded to not have me working as a nurse. It just has always been our way, and I always thought it would have to be our way. And for a time, it did not have to be, so that was a blessing. So I had to research and figure that out. So that's been many years ago now, as you can see, like 10 years ago. So we've done a lot of homeschooling since then. We've used a lot of things. We've stuck with the same core curriculum of classical conversations. The only reason I picked that back then was because I had a lot of friends in our church who I knew did do that, and had just heard them talk about how much they loved it, and I didn't know anything more than that. And then I started on a journey before we moved. Once we moved to our hometown area, and I wasn't working anymore, and we were saying our goodbyes and all that, I was also researching classical conversations as well as other homeschool things that we would need. And I was attending what I could of informational things. It's called practicum. Back then it was a 3-day practicum about classical conversations. I attended 1.5 of those, trying to understand it the best I could. We even went out of town. My mother-in-law went with us to one of them, and one of them was in town, I think. And so I think she went with that one too, but because my mom was working, I believe. But anyways, so I could learn how to do that and what it's all about. And then, just did everything that we could, purchase what we needed to and all that. So that's one of the not perks, I guess you could say, of moving there and working for their government, for their Olympic committee, versus coming over with a Western company. And another one of those things that was a not perk was that most people that move over there or anywhere foreign like that from a company that is sending them or that they're being hired onto, they're going to get moving, like shipping costs, like your things will be shipped or can be shipped over, like even furniture oftentimes. Especially I know a lot of people that had antique furniture that they'd bought in Scotland when they lived in Scotland, and they're from Texas, but you know who you are. I'm friends with you on Facebook. I know you're probably watching. Kind of our grandparents away from home for our kids, actually, is who that was. But they would have their furniture shipped around, which is beautiful that you get to collect furniture from all over the world and jobs that you work, and you get to take it with you. But we did not get to do that at all. Even just, household goods or clothing or anything, nothing got shipped for us. Nothing. Zero. That was not part of the package. What was part of the package to cover our move was we flew Qatar Airways, which is one of the nicest airlines in the world and still is. Has more leg room than a lot of them. They actually do let you have some bags still without having to pay your first couple, but there is a limit, and there's a limit on weight. However, part of our package for moving there included, of course it included paying for us a place to live, thankfully, but we couldn't have done it otherwise. But it also paid for us to move there in our luggage. So, and it paid for extra luggage and extra weight in our luggage. So I learned from friends that had moved before how to do that the best you could. There's some actually very lightweight, almost no weight, Samsonite duffel bags that are huge, extra large duffel bags that basically I was recommended those, and they work really well. And then I did get a really hard case, big rolling suitcase to put things in that needed to be protected well. Because I did take a few framed items and some things like that to try to hang on our walls, although once I got there I realized the walls are cinder blocks and there's special ways to hang things on those, and I don't think I ever really went through the deal with that. I just kind of propped some things around. I might have hung up a couple of things finally at one point, but minimally. I didn't do a lot of hanging. More so I would put things on shelves, leaning, things like that, or tape things, posters or something. But anyway, we had a lot of space though in our villa. It was very, very large, but that's for another episode. But yeah, so I had to, not knowing ahead of time, even just moving from Covington to hometown to visit people, I'm still also having to think about what are we going to move with? What are our necessities? We're moving to a Middle Eastern country. What kind of clothes do I need to bring for myself? Because we were not, thankfully, even though they're under Sharia law, they're not really hard on Westerners, and they want us there, and we're 80% of their population actually. So they're really kind in that they don't make us wear the burqa, hijab, all of the black coverings if you're not Muslim and that's not part of your way. They just ask that you respect them and basically not show your shoulders and your knees. I didn't have a problem with that. European women, they don't care, and they don't bother them about that other than look at them and talk about them behind their back or right in their face, maybe make faces at them and stuff, but they do not come after you and prosecute you or anything like that if you don't dress accordingly. But they do ask that you respect that, which I had no problem with again. So, but again, just trying to whittle down wardrobe to, I don't know how much space I'm going to have for it there, much less in luggage, but, and then a baby, I'm moving a baby there, and then a preteen boy, and then the homeschool thing, and it's a whole new homeschool to us. A lot of books, a lot of things like that. We did a lot of Kindle, but we did have a lot of hard copy books and textbooks and things. Just a lot of things to think about and figure out. So did the best we could getting the house moved out of and getting what we thought maybe we would move there with, put in our different things, and loaded down the car to move to North Louisiana before the big move, and made the trip. And wow. And we were up until like 5 a.m. doing and it started raining at the last part of it. And then finally and so we went and stayed in a hotel in town until, I don't know, 11, 12, 1 o'clock the next day. Did some swimming in the swimming pool at the hotel for a little bit with the kids before we left town. And then left, and my mom was with us for that whole bit, and we made our way. It's a 6-hour drive, so we went to North Louisiana, and then we had to do life there, tell people goodbye, make trips to see people and do fun things for this summer, but also still figure out this homeschooling thing and still figure out what are we really going to take with us when we go across the world and on the plane in our luggage. What really is necessary and what maybe isn't. And then with the stuff that we whittled down, or I did mostly, but I did have some help off and on, here's our bags we're going to end with. I got the luggage scales, so I can make sure they weren't too terribly huge. But here's what we're going to end with. So what do we got to get rid of? And it was just such a big deal. A lot of work, and mentally and physically. And then finally, this is mostly all at my in-laws' house where all of that was, and so then finally got it down to what we thought was going to be the things. So then all the other stuff had to go back down to South Louisiana and into that storage in Covington, or be gotten rid of, which we did some more of that. So there was another trip down there, which was a blessing because we love living down there and miss it, still miss it to this day. So that was nice to get to go back one more time and see everybody real quickly, or whoever we could, and drop things back into the storage there. And then after that, we never saw that stuff again until not even when we first moved back to the States. It was probably 1.5 to 2 years of living back in the States before we got to see that again. And then it was a surprise that my in-laws arranged that they went down and got some help from my brother-in-law who lived down that way at the time to get things out of our storage for us and drive it over to us, a long drive from over there to where we were living in Central Texas when they did this, and then they just showed up in a U-Haul with it at our rent house in Central Texas. And so for quite a while, I guess about 4 years probably, we didn't see that stuff again. Like, yeah, that was just wow. And so we lived very minimally for that first couple of years back in the States, plus over there in the Middle East, which wasn't bad. I need to do a better job at getting back to that, but haven't quite gotten there yet, but getting better and better at times. So anyway, that was kind of what encompassed our time prior to the big move and why we did it that way. And so can you imagine that all the stipulations around that and just doing that? But we did it. But did you die? No, we did not. So finally, toward the end of that summer, it was time to wrap it all up and go. And in the meantime, I had to get myself a passport. Our son had one because he had gone with my in-laws to Canada at one point when he was a little bit younger, but still in the same time period that it was not expired. He had to go up there to be in a wedding of one of my mother-in-law's relatives. So he had his, but I had to get one, and our baby girl, who was between 6 and 9 months old at the time we got it, because we moved to North Louisiana when she was 6 months old and left the country when she was 9 months old. Had to get her a passport at our local. It was actually, I did that before she was 6 months old, maybe, because it was while we were still living in South Louisiana. I remember the post office we went to and the sweet man that did it. And it was a very different process for her than it was for our 2-week-old baby later in Qatar. He actually took a picture of her just down in her car seat, looking down on her, I believe. Maybe we laid her on a blanket on the floor or not, or something. I don't remember even for sure, except that he took the picture of her like from above, and it was fine. That wasn't how it went down with the 2-week-old baby later. I'll tell you about that when I get there. Just pay attention, tune in when the time comes. However, yes, so I've had to get 2 babies' passports at this point, or later down the line, up to this point in my life today. I've had to get 2 babies' passports, a preteen a passport, or actually he was younger than that at the time I got his, and then myself. And so, and on top of that, I left this out. Yeah, all those months still living in South Louisiana prior to moving to North Louisiana and prior to moving to Qatar, I had to go through the whole humongous process of validating or getting our important records validated. Specifically my husband's first, because while he was there, and I even had to get them shipped over to him, his transcripts from college. I had to hunt down his transcripts, his official transcripts, had to then send them through the validation process that Qatar requires, which includes sending it to their Houston consulate, which was the closest one to where we lived in South Louisiana at the time. But that was, I think, the final step. I had to go through all these steps. I had to find out what they were. And then I had to go, I think it was something local in the parish that we lived in. But then after that, they had to go to the Secretary of State, so John Kerry at the time, which when I first sent them to him, apparently he was out of the country on a job thing. And so they had to sit in his office and wait for him to return so that he could put his signature on, which I have his signature on those to this day, I believe, somewhere. He had to sign my husband's and any of our stuff that we had validated in this way. He had to sign that. And then it had to go back to us, and then I had to send it. This is all while I'm working full time and either in the process of either pregnant or postpartum at different points. And then I had to ship it to the Houston consulate and get the Qatar people in the Houston Qatar consulate to sign it and stamp it and whatever they had to do. And then they sent it back to us, to me. And then for his, it was his transcripts, I had to send those over to him in Qatar and hope that they got there to the right place, because mailing things there is just not straightforward at all. You do not have just a typical mailbox by any means. No. So that's a whole nother thing for once we move there, I'll tell you about. But so I had to ship that to him and hope he got it. He did, and then he had to give that to his employers, and all as quickly as possible once they told him he needed that, which they did not tell him before he left. And then on top of that, I had to do that same process with, I think I did it with my school records, even though I wasn't planning to work there, just in case I might need it. But we definitely had to have it for our marriage license, because it's illegal for you to live together as a couple like that in Qatar if you're not married. And you have to prove it with your, not just marriage license, but your validated marriage license all the way down the line, just like I described. So I had to do the same thing later with that as well. I don't think I did it initially because I didn't know at first. So I don't know. And then, because it also has to stay as one package once you get it done, so I also didn't need it to go to him when I might need it along the way too. And then I had to use that when I checked in at the hospital to have the baby once we were living there, because again, you can't have a baby outside of wedlock and, well, legally have a baby outside of wedlock. You would have to go to jail if you did that. And there was at least one person that I know of for a fact that was in jail, a Filipino lady at the time, who had just had a baby and was raising her little baby in jail there with her because of that. So yeah, I won't go into details on that except to say, yes, I had to do that with our marriage license. And I think my transcripts for school, I'm trying to think if there was anything else I can think of, but that's all I can think of offhand. But that was quite a process as well, so I couldn't leave that one out. And so yeah, so then we spent our summer enjoying things, but also stressing over, what do we take, what do we not take? Let's get this back down to storage. Let's, go here, go there, see these people, see those people. Oh my, and Daddy's not here, and we miss Daddy, and his baby girl is growing, and he's not hardly known her for more than a month of her life, and in person, and all of these things. So, and then his little boy is missing him and needing him, and his wife, and his parents, and everybody, his mom, his his in-laws, and everybody. So yeah, his siblings, his brother and sister-in-law. So it was quite an adventure. So we spent that summer like that, and then at the end of September, beginning of October, I believe it was like September 29th, maybe somewhere in that range, my in-laws drove us over to Dallas to fly Dallas. Oh no, I just almost lost you, but that's okay because it's been a much longer video than I planned. I hope that it was interesting, and if I've left anything out that you're curious about, or if I brought up anything that you want to know more about, feel free to ask me questions in the comments or message me, whatever you want to do. Sorry it took so long, but moving to the Middle East isn't an easy thing, is it? So it takes a lot to prepare for something like that. Even moves across the country that we've done before that and since then take a lot to prepare for, but especially going across the world like that and not having an organization that actually does the preparation work for you and pays you well to do the move and assists you with it. We did all of this on our own, every bit of it. So thank you for listening. I hope you have a good night, and I'll talk to you later, but let me know in the comments what it is that might have sparked your curiosity or that I didn't settle your curiosity on. And also, if you would like for me to be your one-on-one coach and help you work through life things, detours, exciting but uncertain things that you have to face that seem impossible or scary, whatever it might be. If you want to change careers or change things within your nursing career into a different field, if you're starting homeschool or you're already in homeschool and you just need some help around all of that, let me know in the comments. Say info, comment info if you want me to help you out with some of that, and let's talk. All right, bye.